My name is Ashley Walker and I'm 28 years old. 4 years as an Army combat medic in Iraq taught me to face chaos head-on, but nothing hit harder than a call that came during what should have been family dinner time 6 p.m. when families share stories over a warm meal. I was in the mess hall when my grandfather's voicemail came through, his voice so faint I could barely hear it. Ashley, not doing so good. Your parents aren't picking up. The tremble in his words froze me. I'd heard that tone before, soldiers on the edge of losing it all. My grandfather never asked for help, not once. I hit replay, my gut screaming something was wrong, and started pulling every string for emergency leave. What I found broke me: a house abandoned, my grandfather dying alone in silence, and a betrayal that burned deeper than any battlefield wound. My parents and brother, they were in Hawaii, splashing wine in Facebook photos, grinning like they hadn't a care. I opened my grandfather's safe, pulled out the will he'd hidden, and 1 week later my phone lit up with 33 missed calls. Before I dive into this story, I'd love to know what time you're listening right now and which city you're in. It's incredible to see how far these real experiences reach. Iraq had forged me, sprinting through gunfire to stabilize teammates' hands steady on tourniquets, dragging soldiers to safety in brutal missions. My unit was family-bound by trust civilians couldn't grasp. Weeks earlier, we'd handled a rapid response to a field injury, saving a sergeant under pressure. Captain noticed me glued to that voicemail later, my food untouched. "Walker, talk to me," he said. I played at my grandfather's plea and a whisper about my brother borrowing money years ago, never repaid for his so-called business. Captain pushed my leave through, saying, "Go fix this." The flights were a haze, my calls to my parents hitting voicemail. I didn't warn them I was coming, partly to surprise, partly to see what they were hiding. In Denver's suburbs, my grandfather's house loomed, yard choked with weeds, porch buried in newspapers. The spare key was still under the rock. Inside, the air reeked of illness. "Grandfather, it's Ashley." Silence. Upstairs, he lay still, chest barely moving, skin burning. I checked his pulse, weak fading, and dialed 911, my voice steady but rage boiling. This wasn't neglect. This was betrayal, and I'd make them pay. Before I dive deeper into this story, I'd love to know what time you're listening right now and which city you're in. It's incredible to see how far these real experiences reach. My hands shook as I relayed Grandpa's condition to the 911 dispatcher, my combat medic training, keeping my voice steady despite the panic clawing at me. Male 79, severe dehydration, missed heart meds, signs of malnutrition, probable pneumonia onset. The paramedics arrived fast, bursting through the front door of the quiet Denver suburban house. I identified myself as a combat medic, rattling off vitals and symptoms to Megan, the lead paramedic, who nodded as she hooked up an IV. "Good call getting here when you did," she said, her tone grim. Another day, and he might not have made it. In the ambulance, I gripped Grandpa's frail hand, his skin paper-thin, veins stark under the fluorescent light. His eyes flickered open, unfocused but locking onto mine. "Ashley, you shouldn't be here," he rasped, guilt in his voice. "Your service?" I squeezed his hand. "I'm right where I need to be." But my mind was racing, piecing together the neglect, unopened meds, moldy dishes, the house falling apart. This wasn't a one-day oversight. This was weeks of abandonment, and I couldn't shake the image of my parents and David sipping cocktails in Hawaii, their Facebook posts mocking me with their carefree captions. Back in Iraq, my life had been a cycle of high-stakes missions. Just 3 weeks before my unit had scrambled to a field injury, soldiers hit during a patrol, chaos everywhere. I'd sprinted to Private Alex Martinez, blood soaking his leg, and applied a tourniquet while shouting for cover. Specialist Megan Garcia dragged him behind a barrier as I worked bullets kicking up dust nearby. Lieutenant Kevin Miller and Sergeant Ryan Collins made it out too, thanks to our teamwork. "Walker, you're a machine under pressure," Captain Brandon Young had said, later clapping my shoulder. That moment stuck with me, trust forged in crisis, the kind of bond my real family seemed to lack. It was Captain Brandon who'd noticed me unraveling after Grandpa's voicemail. I'd been sitting alone in the mess hall replaying it, his frail voice cutting through the noise of clattering trays. "Something's off, Walker," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. I told him about Grandpa, how he'd raised me during my parents' endless self-discovery trips, how my brother David had borrowed $3,000 from me before I deployed, claiming it was for his startup. I'd wired it from my savings, trusting him, only to learn later he'd blown it on a trip to Vegas with his wife. Captain didn't hesitate. "File for emergency leave. I'll pull strings." The process wasn't easy. Paperwork approvals, signatures from multiple officers. Military bureaucracy moved like molasses without hard proof of a crisis. I called my parents' phones, then David's over and over, straight to voicemail. Grandpa's line rang dead too. Captain Brandon called in favors, citing my record. "Your gut's telling you something, Walker." "That's enough for me," he said. When the leave finally cleared, my unit gathered at the airstrip. "Don't get soft on us stateside." Megan Garcia teased her hug tight. Ryan Collins, gruff as ever, muttered, "Take care of your grandpa, then get back here." The journey to Denver was a blur. Military transports, commercial flights, layovers, where I kept dialing each unanswered call, twisting the knot in my stomach tighter. I didn't tell my family I was coming. Part of me wanted to see their faces when I walked in unannounced, but another part, the part sharpened by years in a war zone, wanted to catch them off guard to see what they were hiding. Landing in Denver, the quiet suburbs felt surreal after Iraq's chaos. The taxi driver glanced at my uniform, my duffel bag heavy at my feet. "Homecoming?" he asked. I shrugged. "Something like that." When I stepped into Grandpa's house, the neglect hit like a punch. The grandfather clock ticked loudly in the silence, the air thick with that unmistakable smell of illness I knew from field hospitals. My boots echoed as I moved upstairs, calling his name. Finding him in that bedroom, barely breathing, flipped a switch in me. As the paramedics loaded him onto the stretcher, Megan, the paramedic, asked, "You trained in the field?" I nodded, handing her his unopened pill bottles. 4 years in Iraq. "You learned to move fast." She shook her head. "He's lucky you showed up." At the hospital, they rushed Grandpa to the ER, leaving me in the waiting room, helpless, a stark contrast to the control I'd had in combat. My medic instincts screamed to act, but here I was, just a granddaughter, not a soldier. I pulled out Grandpa's phone, which I'd grabbed with his wallet, needing answers. A text thread from 3 weeks ago stopped me cold. He'd written to my mom, "Not feeling well, trouble with meds. Can you come by?" Her reply, "Busy with work, Dad. Call a neighbor." He texted again, desperate, "Please, I don't feel right." No response. Then I saw David's name in the thread. "Mom swamped Grandpa. I'll handle it." But he didn't. The next day, they'd all jetted off to Hawaii, leaving him alone. I opened Facebook on my phone, and there they were, my parents, and David, tanned and laughing in beach photos. "Paradise vibes," one caption read, posted while Grandpa was starving in his bed. Another showed David's wife raising a wine glass, time-stamped 2 days after his last text. My hands clenched, the betrayal sinking in deeper. David, the brother I'd trusted with my savings, had lied again. He wasn't just neglecting Grandpa, he was part of something uglier. I needed proof, and I needed it now. Sitting in the hospital waiting room, I stared at Grandpa's phone, the text thread burning into my eyes. My mom's dismissal, "Busy with work, Dad. Call a neighbor," and David's lie, "I'll handle it," felt like knives. They'd left him to rot while posting beach selfies in Hawaii. I scrolled through their Facebook again, each photo twisting the blade deeper. My parents, tanned and grinning, captioned one post, "Living our best life." David's wife held a wine glass in another, her kids splashing in the ocean, time-stamped the day after Grandpa's desperate plea. My brother, who'd conned me out of $3,000 for his fake startup, was at it again, lying, abandoning, profiting. I dialed my mom's number, my thumb hovering before hitting call. The line rang 4 times before she picked up laughter and music spilling through the background. "Ashley, honey." What a surprise! Her voice was syrupy, slurred from drinks. "Where are you?" I asked, keeping my tone even though my grip on the phone tightened. "Oh, we're just in Hawaii, a little getaway. Much needed break, with all the stress of looking after your grandfather." She giggled, the sound grating like sandpaper. "Stress," I snapped. "I'm sitting in the ICU with Grandpa right now. He's in critical condition, dehydrated, malnourished, missed his heart meds for weeks. Alone." Silence stretched. Then she stammered, "That's impossible. We arranged everything. David's been checking on him." Her tone shifted sharp now. "You left us to play soldier, Ashley. David stepped up while you were off in your war zone." The guilt trip hit hard, dragging me back to that moment I'd wired David the money, believing his sob story about a business deal. He'd partied in Vegas instead, and now he was stepping up. I bit back my anger. "Really? Because his last text to Grandpa was a lie, and your nurse quit." I hung up before she could respond, my pulse hammering. I needed facts, not excuses. Scrolling through Grandpa's contacts, I found the home nurse, Samantha Taylor. I called, bracing myself. "Samantha, this is Ashley Walker, Charles Thompson's granddaughter. I'm a combat medic, just got back from Iraq. I found Grandpa in bad shape." "Why'd you stop coming?" She sighed, heavy with regret. "I'm so sorry, Ashley. I stopped 2 weeks ago. Your brother David handled payments, but he stopped sending checks 6 weeks back. I kept going unpaid for a while because I was worried about Charles, but I've got my own family to feed." "Did you tell my parents or David about Grandpa's condition?" I pressed. "I called David repeatedly," she said. "Left voicemails about Charles needing his meds, needing check-ins. He said it was under control, that he'd hired another service. I asked for their contact to pass on my notes, but he brushed me off." I clenched my jaw. "There was no other service, was there?" Samantha paused. "No. I'm so sorry." I thanked her, promising to follow up, my mind racing. David wasn't just negligent, he was orchestrating this. Back in Iraq, I'd learned to read people under pressure. You see it in their eyes, fear lies, or resolve. David's lies were piling up, just like when he'd sweet-talked me into that loan, promising repayment while booking flights to Vegas. I'd trusted him then, but not now. I pulled up Grandpa's phone again, digging deeper. Another text from him to David a week before the Hawaii trip, hard to get upstairs. "Please come by." David's reply, "Busy, Grandpa. I'll send someone." He hadn't. The betrayal wasn't just careless, it was calculated. I leaned back in the stiff hospital chair, the hum of monitors filling the silence. The doctor, Nathan Cole, stepped out. "Family of Charles Thompson." I stood, my duffel still at my feet. "I'm his granddaughter, Ashley Walker." He nodded, his face serious. "He's stable, but critical. Severe dehydration, pneumonia, setting and missed medications for at least 2 weeks. He's lucky you got here." I swallowed hard. "Can I see him?" He led me to the ICU, where Grandpa lay under white sheets, tubes snaking from his arms. His eyes were clearer, now meeting mine. "Ashley," he whispered, voice weak but warm. "You came all this way." I took his hand, careful not to jostle the IV. "Of course I did." "Why didn't you tell me it was this bad?" He looked away, ashamed. "Your parents said you were too busy saving lives. David promised he'd handle everything." My stomach twisted. "David again." "When did you last see them?" I asked. "A month ago," he said. "Dropped off groceries, said they were swamped with work. Then the nurse stopped coming." He closed his eyes, exhausted. I tried to manage. I stepped outside to clear my head, the hospital's sterile smell sharp in my nose. My parents and David hadn't just neglected Grandpa, they'd lied to him, to the nurse, to me. Those Facebook posts flashed in my mind, David's wife laughing, my parents toasting by the beach, all while Grandpa starved. But something didn't add up. Grandpa had savings, a pension, more than enough to cover a nurse bill's care. Where was the money going? I gripped my phone, a plan forming. I'd start at Grandpa's house, dig through every drawer, every file. If David was behind this, I'd find proof. And when I did, he'd regret ever crossing me. Back at Grandpa's house that night, the silence felt heavier than any war zone. The hospital had stabilized him, but I couldn't sit still. I needed answers. The kitchen counter was buried under unopened bills, electric, water, property tax, all stamped past due. I rifled through drawers, finding bank statements that made my blood run cold. Regular withdrawals, thousands at a time, drained from Grandpa's savings over the past year. One name kept popping up as cosigner: David. My brother, who'd scammed me out of $3,000 for his fake startup, was bleeding Grandpa dry. I moved to the basement where Grandpa kept his old desk. Dust coated everything, but a stack of credit card statements caught my eye. Charges for restaurants, boutiques, a travel agency, places Grandpa would never visit. One receipt showed a $5,000 payment for a Hawaii resort signed by David. Another listed an auction sale for Grandpa's antique watch collection worth $10,000 with David's signature. My hands shook as I pieced it together. This wasn't neglect. It was theft, systematic, deliberate, and led by my brother with my parents' blessing. Then I remembered something Grandpa had shown me years ago before I deployed. He'd led me to this basement, pointing to a small painting of the Rockies on the wall. "Ashley, if anything ever happens to me, check behind this," he'd said, his voice serious. I slid the painting aside, revealing a wall safe. My birthday, 0315199997, unlocked it with a click. Inside were folders, a USB drive labeled "For Ashley," and a note in Grandpa's neat handwriting: "Watch first." My throat tightened. Even now he was protecting me. I plugged the USB into his old laptop, the screen flickering to life. Grandpa's face appeared, gray hair, combed eyes, sharp but heavy with worry. "Ashley," he began, "if you're seeing this, something's gone wrong. I've always feared your parents and David might prioritize themselves over family. Your mother and father have leaned on my savings too long, but David, he's the one I worry about most. He borrowed from me years ago, never repaid, always had excuses. I saw calculation in his eyes when we discussed my health last year." He leaned closer, voice firm. "I set up a trust for my care with your parents and David as executors, but with strict rules. If they neglect me or misuse funds, my lawyer Matthew Lewis has instructions to transfer control to you. You're the only one I trust, Ashley, with your honor and duty from the Army. The documents are in this safe, including a contingency clause to remove them as executors and make you my power of attorney." He paused, softening. "I'm proud of you, granddaughter. Protect yourself and our family's legacy." The video ended, and I sat, frozen, tears burning my eyes. Grandpa had seen through David's lies, my parents' selfishness, and prepared for this. I opened the folders, his will, trust details, and Matthew Lewis's business card with a note. "Call any time." It was 10 p.m., too late to call, but I'd be at his office first thing tomorrow. The evidence was damning: David's signatures, the drained accounts, the sold antiques. They'd gambled with Grandpa's life, and I'd make sure they lost everything. I barely slept, my mind replaying Grandpa's video, David's fake promises, my parents' beach photos. In Iraq, I'd faced split-second decisions, tourniquets under fire, dragging teammates to safety. This was different, but just as urgent. I remembered a mission where I'd stabilized Lieutenant Kevin Miller, blood pouring from his arm, while Specialist Megan Garcia covered us. "You've got steady hands, Walker," she'd said. Those hands were steady now, sorting documents, preparing for battle. My parents and David thought they could outsmart everyone, but they didn't know me anymore. By morning, I was at Matthew Lewis's office in downtown Denver, folders and USB in my bag. The receptionist ushered me in, saying, "Mr. Lewis has been expecting a call from your family for years." Matthew, a gray-haired man in his 60s, stood to shake my hand. "Ashley Walker, your grandfather spoke highly of you, your service, your strength." I laid out everything: Grandpa's critical condition, the unpaid bills David's forged, signatures, the auctioned antiques, the Hawaii trip while he starved. I played the video, Matthew's face hardening with each word. "This is clear elder neglect and financial exploitation," he said, tapping the contingency clause. "Your grandfather's will is airtight. We can file an emergency petition today to grant you temporary guardianship and freeze all accounts your parents and David have accessed." I nodded, my resolve solid. "How fast can we move?" Matthew's eyes narrowed. "I'll call Judge Victoria Lane directly. She's handled cases like this before. With Grandpa's condition and this evidence, we'll get a hearing by afternoon." As we prepared the paperwork, my phone buzzed, another call from David. I let it go to voicemail, his voice smug through the speaker. "Ashley, you're overreacting. Let's talk this out like family." Family. He'd sold Grandpa's legacy for a beach vacation. I deleted the message, my anger sharpening into a plan. The court would be just the start. I'd expose every lie, every dollar they stole, and make sure they faced consequences not just in court, but in every way that hurt. By noon, Matthew, Lewis, and I sat in Judge Victoria Lane's chambers, the air thick with tension. The emergency petition was on her desk, Grandpa's medical reports, bank statements showing drained accounts, David's forged signatures, and the auction receipt for his antiques. Matthew presented the case with precision: elder neglect, financial exploitation, and Grandpa's video laying out the contingency clause. I sat straight, my army training keeping me calm, but inside fury simmered. Judge Lane, a sharp woman in her 60s, scanned the documents, her expression unreadable. "This is egregious," she finally said. "Temporary guardianship is granted to Ashley Walker, effective immediately. All accounts are frozen, and a restraining order will bar your parents and brother from accessing Charles Thompson's assets." I exhaled relief, mixing with resolve. Matthew squeezed my shoulder as we left the courthouse. "Your grandfather would be proud," he said. "But brace yourself, they'll fight back." He was right. My phone buzzed relentlessly, David's number, then my parents' calls piling up. I ignored them, heading back to the hospital to check on Grandpa. His condition was improving, but he looked fragile under the ICU monitors. I held his hand, promising, "I've got you now. They can't hurt you anymore." His weak smile fueled my determination. Hours later, my parents and David stormed into the ICU, their resort tans jarring against the sterile room. My mother, clutching a designer purse, spoke first, voice loud enough to spike Grandpa's heart rate on the monitor. "Ashley, what is this nonsense? Legal papers at the airport? You're freezing our accounts." My father stepped forward, face red. "You've lost it, staging some military coup against your own family." David, in a crisp polo, smirked. "Grandpa wanted us to live well, Ashley. You're blowing this out of proportion." I stood, positioning myself between them and Grandpa's bed, my voice low but commanding. "Keep it down, this is an ICU. I found Grandpa starving alone while you were sipping wine in Hawaii. David, you forged his signatures, sold his antiques, drained his pension. You call that living well?" David's smirk faltered, but he doubled down. "You don't get it. You ran off to war, left us to handle everything." I stepped up. My mother nodded. "David's been here, Ashley, unlike you." Their words stung, dragging me back to that $3,000 loan. David never repaid his lies about a startup while he partied in Vegas. I leaned in, voice steady. Stepped up. "You stopped paying the nurse Samantha 6 weeks ago. You ignored Grandpa's texts begging for help. I've got the bank statements, the auction receipts, your name's on everything, David." My father scoffed. "You're paranoid, Ashley. That war messed you up." I held up Grandpa's phone, showing their ignored texts. "This isn't paranoia. It's evidence." A nurse signaled for security as Grandpa's monitors beeped faster. My mother's eyes darted, her tone shifting to fake concern. "We're his family, Ashley. You can't keep us from him." I didn't blink. "The restraining order says I can. You'll get your chance in court in 30 days. Until then, stay away." David stepped closer, voice low. "You're making a mistake, Ashley. We'll fight this." I met his gaze, my combat instincts kicking in. Try me. Now leave, or security will. A guard appeared, and they left my mother's dramatic huff echoing down the hall. I turned to Grandpa, his eyes wide but proud. "You sounded like me in my prime," he whispered. I squeezed his hand, guilt and anger warring inside me. They'd nearly killed him, and now they were playing victims. Back at Grandpa's house that evening, I dug deeper, finding more evidence: a mortgage application with David's forged signature, attempting to refinance Grandpa's paid-off home. The bank had flagged it, but the attempt alone was damning. Matthew called, confirming the investigation was moving fast. "We've got records of $150,000 diverted over the past year," he said. "David's signatures are everywhere with your parents' approval." I sat in Grandpa's basement, surrounded by his old photos and books, my resolve hardening. In Iraq, I'd learned to act decisively, stabilizing wounds under fire, making calls that saved lives. This was no different. David thought he could gaslight me, but the evidence was ironclad. My parents thought they could guilt me, but I was done with their lies. Matthew's next words sealed it. "The judge wants a full accounting. We're pushing for permanent removal of their executor status. You ready for the next step?" I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "More than ready." My phone lit up again, another voicemail from David, his tone desperate now. "Ashley, let's work this out. You don't want to tear the family apart. Tear the family apart. They'd done that when they left Grandpa to die." I deleted the message, my plan clear. Court was just the beginning. I'd expose their lies to everyone, friends, neighbors online, and make sure they faced every consequence. David's smug face in those Hawaii photos flashed in my mind. He'd regret underestimating me. The days after the hospital confrontation were a storm of action. Matthew Lewis moved like lightning, filing for a permanent removal of my parents and David as executors of Grandpa's will. The evidence was airtight: $150,000 siphoned from Grandpa's accounts, forged mortgage applications, and his antique watch collection sold off for David's luxury vacations. I wasn't just fighting for Grandpa anymore. I was dismantling their lies. My phone kept buzzing, voicemails piling up from my mother pleading, "Ashley, we're family. Don't do this." And David, his tone shifting from smug to panicked. "You're ruining us." I deleted each one, my resolve like steel forged in Iraq's chaos. I took it further. Using my military network, I reached out to a contact in the Denver DA's office, a former Army buddy who specialized in financial crimes. I sent him the bank statements, auction receipts, and Grandpa's video pushing for a criminal investigation into David for embezzlement. "This is solid," he said. "We'll open a case." Meanwhile, I drafted a public post on my own Facebook, uploading side-by-side images: Grandpa frail in his hospital bed, tubes in his arms next to my parents, and David toasting wine glasses in Hawaii. The caption was simple: "While my grandfathers starved, they partied. This is what elder neglect looks like." I hit post and it spread fast. Neighbors, friends, even David's coworkers shared it. Their comments scathing. The fallout was swift. My parents and David tried damage control, posting vague apologies about misunderstandings. But the truth was out. David's employer, a local real estate firm, suspended him after clients questioned his ethics. My mother's book club dropped her, and my father's golf buddies stopped calling. Their social circle, built on appearances, crumbled under the weight of public shame. I didn't stop there. Matthew uncovered more. David had used Grandpa's credit card for a new car lease, a sleek convertible parked at his house. I pushed the DA to seize it as evidence, forcing David to liquidate assets to cover restitution. The car was gone within a week, sold to pay back a fraction of what he'd stolen. In court 30 days after the emergency hearing, Judge Victoria Lane didn't hold back. "The evidence of elder neglect and financial exploitation is overwhelming," she declared, her voice cutting through the room. My parents and David sat across from me, their faces a mix of defiance and desperation. Matthew presented the full accounting: $150,000 diverted, forged signatures on a mortgage attempt, and antiques sold without consent. The contingency clause in Grandpa's will was invoked, permanently removing them as executors. I was named sole heir and power of attorney with court oversight to manage Grandpa's assets. A disinheritance clause sealed their fate. They'd forfeited any claim to his estate through their actions. David's attorney tried to argue, claiming he'd acted in Grandpa's best interests. I stood my voice steady. Best interests? He forged signatures, sold Grandpa's heirlooms, and left him to die while vacationing in Hawaii. I have the receipts. The judge's gavel fell, finalizing my guardianship. As we left, my mother grabbed my arm, tears streaming. "Ashley, how could you do this to us?" I pulled away. "You did this to yourselves when you chose wine glasses over Grandpa." David glared, muttering, "This isn't over." I looked him dead in the eyes. "It is for me." Their desperation escalated. They tried breaking into Grandpa's house one night, tripping the security system I'd installed. Police caught them rummaging through his desk, searching for documents to contest the will. The incident strengthened the restraining order, barring them from the property permanently. My parents flooded my phone with texts cycling from "anger, you ungrateful child," to begging. "We'll lose everything." I blocked their numbers along with David's, and every relative they roped in to plead their case. Their words meant nothing. Family wasn't blood. It was action, and they'd shown none. 6 months later, Grandpa sat across from me on his porch in a new home closer to my base just outside Denver. His recovery wasn't perfect. Pneumonia had left scars, and he needed a walker, but his eyes were bright again, watching sparrows at the feeder I'd set up. "You didn't have to do all this, Ashley," he said, his voice stronger now. I poured him tea, smiling. "You'd have done the same for me." I'd requested a stateside transfer, landing a position at a military hospital 30 minutes away. It let me serve while checking on him daily, rebuilding the care system my family had dismantled. The legal battle didn't end with the will. The DA pressed charges against David for embezzlement and elder abuse, citing the forged documents and diverted funds. My parents faced lesser charges for complicity, their names tied to the mortgage fraud. David's assets, his car savings, even part of his house, were liquidated to pay restitution totaling $80,000 so far. The public exposure had cost them more than money. David lost his job permanently. My parents moved to a smaller apartment, their social status in tatters. Neighbors who once waved now crossed the street to avoid them. I didn't feel joy watching them fall, just clarity. In Iraq, I'd learned to make hard calls under pressure, like when I stabilized a soldier while bullets flew, knowing one wrong move could cost a life. Here, the stakes were different, but just as real. Cutting them off wasn't revenge, it was justice, protecting Grandpa from their greed. I looked at him now, sipping tea, and knew I'd made the right choice. This taught me family is about actions, not blood. I had to cut toxic ties to save Grandpa, spotting betrayal early, whether it was David's lies about a startup or their ignored texts while he suffered. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Everyone, check on your elders regularly. Look for signs of neglect or theft: unpaid bills, ignored calls, sudden spending. It can happen in any family, and ignoring it only enables the selfish. Don't wait until it's too late, like I almost did. Thanks for listening to my story. It's been a tough road, but sharing it feels right. Comment below with your own tough family choices. What would you have done? Hit like, subscribe for more real-life stories, and share if this hit home. Your support means the world.
My name is Andrea Johnson. I'm 28 years old, and if you had asked me 2 years ago, I would have sworn I had found the love of my life. I wasn't the type people noticed first when walking into a room. I was dependable, steady, the one who always remembered birthdays, showed up on time, and followed through on promises. Not flashy, not unpredictable, just safe. And for a while, I thought safe was enough. Then came Adrian. From the beginning, he seemed larger than life. He had that magnetic smile that drew people in, the kind of easy charm that made waiters laugh and strangers lean closer. Compared to him, I was the quiet one, but he chose me, or at least I thought he did. We met through a trivia night our mutual friends had set up. I handled the history and geography questions. Adrian crushed pop culture like it was second nature. We laughed until our cheeks hurt. He leaned across the table and said, "You make smart look fun, Andrea." At the time, I melted. Looking back, maybe it was his way of labeling me quiet, dependable, safe. Our relationship looked picture perfect on the outside. Movie nights, dinners, out weekend drives. He would brag about how thoughtful I was, how I always picked up his favorite coffee before his shift, how I stayed up late to quiz him before big presentations. I gave him consistency. He gave me excitement. That's what I thought was balance. But cracks were there. Adrian needed attention like oxygen. If someone complimented me, he'd grin and joke. "Don't praise her too much, or she'll forget how to make her terrible pancakes." Everyone laughed. I did too. I told myself it was harmless teasing. And I loved him. I paid half his rent when his hours were cut. I turned down a relocation promotion because he said long distance would crush him. I drove him to his younger sister's games every Saturday because he hated sitting in traffic. I gave and gave because I thought we were building a future. But Adrian, he liked being admired more than he liked being loved. I didn't let myself see that until the night everything broke. It was a party one of our mutual friends threw, loud music, too much beer, coworkers and classmates all jumbled together. Adrian thrived at these things, always with a glass in hand, the center of a circle. I stayed close, watching, smiling when he pulled me in for a quick kiss to remind people I was his. Then someone asked how we'd gotten together. I thought he'd tell the trivia story or mention how I always remembered the little things that mattered to him. Something sweet. Instead, he smirked, tilted his head back for drama, and said loud enough for the whole room to hear. Honestly, dating Andrea felt like community service. I had to give back somehow, right? The room fell quiet, just for a beat. Then nervous chuckles. Adrian doubled down, waving his hand like it was the best joke of the night. "No, but seriously, she's so dependable it's like adopting a rescue cat. You just do it out of the goodness of your heart." This time the laughter was real, at my expense. I felt every eye flick toward me, waiting to see if I'd laugh too, waiting to see if I'd be a good sport about being the punchline. And for a moment I froze. I wanted to lash back to cut him down with words sharp enough to match the wound in my chest. But what came wasn't anger, it was clarity. This was who Adrian really was. Not just the playful digs, not just the flirting at bars that he brushed off as harmless. This public humiliation dressed up as humor was his truth. I wasn't his partner, I was his project. So I didn't argue. I didn't give him a scene to feed off of. I set my drink down, picked up my coat, and walked out. No slammed doors, no tears, just silence. I heard his voice chasing me through the crowd. "Wait, what, babe? I'm joking." I kept walking. "Oh, come on, don't be dramatic. It was funny." But I didn't stop. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would crack my ribs, but my face was calm, detached. For the first time in years, I wasn't playing along. By the time I reached my car, my phone was buzzing with his name lighting up the screen. I ignored it. Drove to my own apartment, sat on the edge of the bed in the dark, and let the silence wash over me. That was the night everything broke, and the night I learned that sometimes silence can cut deeper than any words. When I woke up the next morning, sunlight was already creeping across my floor. My phone screen glowed like it hadn't slept at all, dozens of missed calls, endless notifications. I didn't open a single one. At first, Adrian's messages were defensive. "Andrea, seriously, you're embarrassing me. Everyone thought it was just a joke. You could have laughed. God, you're so sensitive sometimes." By afternoon, the tone shifted. "I love you, okay? Don't throw everything away over one stupid comment. You know I was kidding. Please pick up." By nightfall, the guilt trips began. Wow. So you're just going to ghost me after everything I did for you, unreal. You're lucky I put up with your moods, Andrea. Anyone else would have left ages ago. The words lit up my phone, one after another, like fireworks that fizzled before they could even touch me. I didn't answer, not once. Instead, I sat in the stillness of my apartment, noticing how quiet it was, without him filling every corner of my life. At first, the silence was suffocating, like being underwater. But after a while, I realized it wasn't drowning me, it was cleansing me. 2 days later, one of my friends who'd been at the party texted, "You okay?" That was brutal. Nobody thought it was funny. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying, "I'm fine." It wasn't true, not entirely. My chest still ached, my stomach twisted whenever I replayed the scene in my mind. But when she wrote back, "You did the right thing," something in me loosened. For the first time in a long time, I believed someone when they said that. Meanwhile, Adrian's messages kept coming, defensive, then pleading. then furious, then desperate, like a pendulum swinging out of control. One voicemail stood out. His voice cracked as he said, "I can't sleep. I feel like I'm losing my mind and you don't even care. Just talk to me, please." I closed my eyes as it played, and instead of pity, I felt relief, because I finally understood. He wasn't sorry for what he'd done. He was sorry for the consequences. He missed the convenience of me, my loyalty, my steadiness, my ability to make his world easier. He didn't miss me. And that realization was like a door clicking shut. So I muted the thread, placed my phone face down, and let the silence grow. Each day that passed, I felt myself shifting. Grief still lingered, but it wasn't the sharp kind anymore. It was dull, fading. Beneath it was something else cold, strong, and steady. Resolve. And for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't shrinking to fit beside someone else's light. I was beginning to find my own. I didn't tell anyone what happened. I didn't need to. The party had done that for me. Word spread faster than I ever could have imagined. Adrian had made the community service joke loud enough for the whole room to hear, and people talk. At first, he tried to spin it. "He's too sensitive," he told our friends. "Andrea can't take a joke. I can't date someone who's that uptight." But apparently, when people repeated the line back, dating Andrea felt like community service, it didn't sound like a harmless joke anymore. It sounded cruel. One by one, I noticed the subtle shifts. Invitations that once had both our names on them now had only mine. Group chats stayed silent for him, but alive for me. A mutual friend confessed they had even removed him from one of the threads after people got tired of his self-justifications. Meanwhile, my phone stopped buzzing. Adrian's texts slowed from dozens a day to just a handful, then eventually nothing. He must have noticed the distance growing, because suddenly his posts online got louder. Selfies at bars, captions like "unbothered," "stronger than ever," pictures with bottles of champagne and neon lights. A new girl on his arm, almost instantly loud, flashy, the type who wore sequin dresses to backyard parties. Her name was Serena. I didn't stalk them. I didn't need to. Screenshots found their way to me through friends the way gossip always does. In every picture, Adrian was front and center, sunglasses on, indoors shirt, unbuttoned, halfway, holding Serena close, like she was a trophy. His captions made me roll my eyes. Finally, someone who matches my energy. It stung, of course. 2 years of my life, 2 years of sacrifices reduced to a single swipe into something shinier, louder, newer. But instead of breaking me, it clarified things further. Because it wasn't love he wanted, it was an audience. And Serena gave him that for now. While he was performing online, I was rebuilding my life offline. I started running in the mornings again, the kind of long runs I used to love before Adrian filled every weekend with his plans. I cooked meals for myself, real ones, not just takeout eaten in the car while rushing to pick him up from somewhere. I stayed late at work by choice, throwing myself into projects instead of throwing them away for his convenience. Every day felt like reclaiming pieces of myself I hadn't realized I'd given up. And while my life grew steadier, his started to fray at the edges. I heard little things in whispers and passing comments. Friends saying Adrian had shown up late to a dinner drunk, making jokes nobody laughed at. How he'd bragged about Serena in one breath, then complained she was too much in the next. The same charm that once made him magnetic now rang hollow. And the irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I had been the one making him look stable, dependable, worth respecting. Without me, the cracks showed. And soon those cracks would widen into something much deeper. Because Adrian's downfall wasn't just beginning, it was already in motion. It didn't take long for the shine to fade. The same way Adrian had once dazzled me, he dazzled Serena, but only for a little while. Whispers started to reach me, carried on the same breeze of gossip that had once spread his community service joke. People had seen him out at bars, at restaurants, even at a rooftop party with other women. He wasn't even subtle about it, laughing too close, touching arms that weren't Serena's. And once someone swore they caught him kissing another woman in plain sight like loyalty, had never been a word in his vocabulary. When Serena confronted him, it wasn't quiet. From what I heard, she'd waited until they were out at dinner in front of people. She demanded answers, and Adrian, true to form, laughed in her face. "What did you expect?" he said, his voice carrying enough for strangers to hear. "You're fun, but you're not the only one." The humiliation I had carried in silence at that party, Serena carried in public under neon lights. And the symmetry of it hit me like poetry. From that night on, his posts changed. Gone were the cocky selfies, the captions dripping with bravado. In their place, vague quotes about betrayal. Black and white photos of half-empty glasses, long rambling rants and stories that vanished within 24 hours. His unbothered act had cracked, and everyone could see through it. Meanwhile, the same friends who once laughed at his jokes started rolling their eyes. Group dinners went on without him. People whispered that he was exhausting, that he turned every conversation back to himself. For the first time in years, Adrian wasn't the star of the room. He was the echo. And I watched it all from a distance, not gloating, not pitying, just calm, detached. Because I realized I didn't have to plot revenge. I didn't have to prove him wrong. Karma was doing all the heavy lifting for me. In the quiet of my apartment, I found myself almost smiling at the thought, not out of cruelty, but because life had finally turned the mirror back on him. And it was showing him everything he had refused to see. The first message came late one night. Hey, I was just thinking about you. Hope you're okay. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just a fishing line tossed into the dark, hoping I'd bite. I didn't. A week later, another text lit up my phone. Drove past that taco place you love. Remember how you ate like 5 in one sitting? Again, nostalgia dressed up as small talk, as if one happy memory could erase years of subtle digs and one unforgettable betrayal. I ignored that too. Then the calls started, always late, always after midnight. At first, I let them ring out. But eventually, curiosity got the better of me, and I listened to the voicemails. His voice didn't sound like Adrian's anymore. It was thinner, frayed at the edges. I don't understand why you're ignoring me. I know I messed up, but we had something real, right? Please just call me back, please. One message bled into the next. Angry ones. So, this is it. You're just gonna throw away 2 years over one comment. Grow up. Sad ones. I miss you. Nobody knows me like you do. Manipulative ones. I can't sleep. I feel like my whole life is falling apart and you don't even care. And finally, desperate ones. Can we just talk, please? I'll fix it. Just one more chance. Each time I listened in silence. Not because I considered going back, but because the contrast was staggering. This was the same man who once lit up every room, who wore his confidence like a crown. Now he was reduced to whispers in the dark, begging into a phone I refused to answer. The temptation wasn't to forgive him. It was to respond just once to remind him of the woman he had underestimated. To say, you don't get to rewrite the ending, Adrian. But I didn't, because the silence said it for me, louder than words ever could. And while his voice grew smaller, mine quiet, steady patient was finally filling the spaces he had once occupied. The last message I ever received from Adrian was short. No bravado, no guilt trip, no jokes. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. I know I can't take it back, but I regret it every day. For a moment, I just stared at the words. There was a flicker in my chest, nostalgia maybe, a reminder that once I had believed in him. But then the truth settled in. He wasn't apologizing for who he was. He was apologizing because he had lost everything that made him feel important. And by then, I had already moved on. My life was bigger now. Work had promoted me into a leadership role I once thought I wasn't ready for. I'd fallen in love again, with the mornings, with my own reflection, with the version of myself I had buried under Adrian's shadow. And yes, eventually with someone new. His name is Tommy. He's nothing like Adrian. Where Adrian sought attention, Tommy gives presence. Where Adrian laughed at my goals, Tommy listens, encourages, even challenges me to dream bigger. With him, I don't feel like a project or a punchline. I feel like a partner. The contrast is staggering. One night, as we walked back from dinner, Tommy reached for my hand without thinking, his thumb brushing gently against mine. And I realized I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't holding my breath, bracing for the next cutting joke. I was safe. Not in the way Adrian once mocked, but in the way every heart deserves to feel respected, seen, chosen. Adrian's voice has long since faded from my phone. His presence has faded from our friends' lives. The man who once made me feel small is now just an echo of a story I no longer carry with shame. Because here's the thing. I learned the best revenge isn't anger. It isn't proving yourself or crafting the perfect comeback. It's indifference. It's walking away and building something better without them. Adrian thought dating me was community service, but in the end, being with him taught me the most important lesson of my life. I was never the project, I was the prize. And the silence I gave him was the loudest truth of all.